Essentially your paper um on my inbox as well, huh? So it's now again in the special edition.
Nice. Okay,
Yeah.
so it will be published in two places. Good.
Okay, I got the signal that we can start. So I will kick it off and let's get moving. So good day, everybody that is listening in. Thank you for being here. We're excited to share with you a wonderful webinar packed with diverse experts. This webinar is titled Youth Brain Skills in the Intelligent Age, Boosting Productivity. Obviously, productivity is very important in the context of global macroeconomics and many nation states struggling with productivity. So we need new solutions for productivity. The intelligent age is the age of artificial intelligence, and something that the World Economic Forum kicked us off with at the start of the year to focus on how do we survive and thrive in the age of intelligence. So we've picked up a little bit there from the World Economic Forum, and we're really focusing today on youth, which is of course the future workforce and the future citizenry of society. So today we have terrific expertise across the spectrum of youth, civil society, think tanks, labor, business, and you'll see that unfold as I introduce the speakers one by one. We're going to have a set of keynotes and then discussants as well. It will be very rich and wide-ranging. Let me kick us off with some framing slides so that we can be oriented. Okay, just checking everyone can see the slides. Okay, great. So what I want to frame up is the brain economy. So the brain economy is a new economic paradigm which is focused on boosting the brain power of nation states and individuals and companies and et cetera and cities. It is focused on the belief that fostering positive brain capital, which includes cognitive health, mental resilience, emotional well-being, can unlock greater human potential. So that's what the brain economy is, and we're focused on thinking about that across all sectors. And we have this recent perspective piece that was published by the World Economic Forum and the McKinsey Health Institute that dives a bit deeper into the brain economy for anyone that's interested to learn more about it. Brain health is a really meaningful, we believe, economic driver of economic growth in the brain economy. So brain health encompasses mental health, substance use, stroke, and other neurological conditions. Brain health is not just about deficits, about depression or anxiety. It's also about strengths, about the strengths of your brain and the performance of your brain. Brain capital, as many of you know, is a new form of human capital that incorporates brain health and brain skills. And brain capital is important in the context of the neuroscience renaissance that we're living through, where we have better ways of understanding the brain and mapping the brain. And then the brain economy, as I mentioned before, is this new economic paradigm. McKinsey Health Institute has done some return on investment analysis to suggest that the brain economy could yield a $26 trillion boost to the global economy through the prevention of disorders and through boosting brain health generally. So this is a big, big opportunity for growth. We believe that the brain economy and these brain capital and brain health are new levers that have not been previously considered very much or given much attention in the context of large-scale economics. It's important to recognize that skills are changing, and we will unpack this more. The skills that we need today are in the age of intelligence, are analytical thinking, resilience, flexibility, and agility, creativity. and these will just continue to be important into the future. So our ability to be brain healthy and brain adept with the right skills is essential. And so what does this mean for early childhood education, K-12 education, labor markets, business leaders that are thinking about the youth of today moving into the workforce? These are all important questions that we will hopefully get at. And of course, we know that there are problems with literacy and numeracy declining in many parts of the world. So whilst we need more advanced skills, we're actually losing skills as per data sets such as the recent OECD adult skills survey that came out a few months ago. So really important that we redouble our efforts to think about brain skills. Of course, we know that artificial intelligence can be helpful as a co-pilot, helpful in the development of chatbot innovations, analytic innovations, better, diagnostic and treatment systems for brain disorders, for example. But there are downsides of AI, particularly to youth. We got to think about algorithm addiction with social media and device usage. We've got to think about algorithm-fueled mis and disinformation, which we know is proliferating. We've got to think about AI-enabled online sports betting and other gambling, which is particularly harmful to male youth. And then unregulated chatbots. There's been some recent investigations from the Wall Street Journal that have exposed some of the concerns about the chatbot usage amongst youth and eroticization and such. So AI can be very positive, but can also be very negative. So part of what we hope to unpack today is responsible AI innovation. We were delighted that the Financial Times journalist Tej Parikh picked up our work a few months ago and wrote an article about how the human mind is in recession, is how he proposed that technology strains our brain health capacity and skills. And in this article, Tej noted that brain capital is really important, and he articulated why, but that we're investing so much in artificial intelligence and really not thinking about brain capital and investing as much in brain capital. So he really proposed that AI could potentially be very corrosive to our brain capital. And so we really need to redouble efforts to think about brain capital investments, particularly in the intelligent age. So I encourage folks to read that if it is of interest to you. It's good to know that there are some positive things happening. The UNESCO, for example, is one of the organizations behind the Algorithm Literacy Project. So wonderful things to think about. And here's the full punchline bullet points. It means understanding that they of course infuse this throughout their programs. AI is not magic, which of course a lot of people in society believe it is. Algorithms are not always right. The data we use to train algorithms really matters. And maybe we can talk more about these things. And AI comes with ethical issues like bias. So that's just wonderful basic algorithm literacy for folks. Another point of positivity is that the current administration recently signed an executive order advancing artificial intelligence education for American youth. They've articulated high level a range of strategies for boosting AI education, certain sort of hackathon approaches, education of teachers, education of school infrastructure. So not a lot of information in the executive order, but it shows that there is serious interest in this from the US administration. And then finally, this webinar that we're doing today is really the start of our G7 Canada Brain Economy Summit. So this is a landmark occasion today. The G7 leaders meeting is held in Kananaskis in mid-June. And we have been developing our Brain Economy Summit to really try to map into the G7 strategy. Obviously, the G7 is some may call it the economic NATO. It's focused on productivity, artificial intelligence in particular this year. We have written a couple of editorials to propose that the brain economy is a new way to boost productivity and the role of artificial intelligence to be an aid. So we have a link to our G7 summit that I encourage folks to look at. You can express your interest if you want to attend. There are a mixture of webinars and in-person activities on June 14th in Calgary. And so we have an ambitious agenda with the G7 to develop a finance and health ministerial working group around the brain economy, which would be the first ever in history. We'll be developing a declaration and making sure that we align with the engagement groups of the G7. The engagement groups of the G7 are business, government, civil, think tank, youth, women, science, and labor. And of course, we have good representation here today on that. And there are a bunch of other ways here that we're going to produce meaningful outputs from the G7 summit. So you know it's not just a talk fest. We're really getting serious about beefing up our global brain economy strategy, and then making sure that we launch effectively into the G7 G7 France next year. And so this is the basic structure with virtual roundtables and an in-person session. So welcome to the webinar again. These are the framing slides. It's the brain economy, why we're interested in youth, and some of the dynamics that we hope to unpack. And so without further ado, I would like to introduce Rim Ayadi to give an opening keynote. Rim is the president and founder of the Euro-Mediterranean Economists Association, and will provide some opening remarks. So thank you, Rim.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Harris, for this very comprehensive and very clear introduction. Our webinar today is really touching a center point, which is, you have mentioned already, first of all, human minds matter in many senses. And then we could think that our human minds could be central in elevating productivity and aided, as you mentioned, through the artificial intelligence enhancements, or I would say development over those past years. And then we probably need to rethink completely the concept of productivity, because as economists, we are still really thinking of the indicators of productivity and total factor productivity, which are in fact based on traditional models. So in an age where artificial intelligence is reshaping in a way our thinking, the way we work, the way we innovate, I wonder whether we should keep productivity as it was before, in this simple equation of quantity output over input. And I think it is yet a measure of efficiency of our economies, how much input we use to maximize the production of output based on the capital and labor and also technology. But I think we are still really thinking of a quantity approach, which is, for example, the output per worker, or an output per hour work, but now not really the quality of this hour worked, or the quality of what we are producing in terms of our mind and our capability to evolve over our lifespan. But at the same time, there is the artificial intelligence, and nowadays I think we need to factor this in carefully on how we adapt our thinking in terms of productivity and total factor productivity to allow us to integrate new concepts like cognitive skills, emotional intelligence, channels of creativity, channels of analytical thinking, and also the artificial intelligence driven type of innovation that is nowadays very, very in play. Now, in fact, the simplistic representation, in my view, of productivity nowadays is totally insufficient for several reasons. And I mentioned, again, we are moving into an environment of complexity, of interaction and interconnectedness between different elements of output. And then again, this concept is not really taking into account innovation, quality, complexity, interconnectedness, generated also through the artificial intelligence era where we are living in. At the same time, as I mentioned, it does not capture at all the cognitive and emotional inputs, and these are nowadays important in the production or in the overall function, and neither the collective intelligence, for example, in the processes of creation and co-creation. And I think at the same time, this type of matrix, they completely overlook the intangibles. And this we've been trying for many years to include those type of thinking intangibles. But again, there is a lot to be done in that area. Now, of course, the artificial intelligence brings another challenge, but also other opportunities, because we still do not know what is the interaction or the result of interaction between artificial intelligence and the human synergy. And this also depends significantly on the way we interact with the artificial intelligence, not to really fall into the challenges that you mentioned, Harris, particularly for the youth. And of course, these are all elements that one have to think of in the education system and also in the consumption of this artificial intelligence type of devices, and at which age of the kids, of the children, and also for the youth, and how to use it, in fact, in our education systems. But then at the same time, we need to also think that nowadays we are moving very fast in many aspects. For example, our economies are required to adapt their skills, and also this is impacting the productivity concept and models that we have nowadays. Our models generally are static, are not dynamic, and do not factor in these movements over the time. So this is also something that probably artificial intelligence could help in that sense, and try to give us more data in a dynamic matter. And also this productivity matrix that we have as in economics, of course, it underestimates innovation, the curve of learning, and as I mentioned previously, the collective intelligence, bottom-up intelligence, and also the sharing of knowledge over time. So we need to really rethink it very seriously, and then it will help us also to redefine, I would say, new productivity paradigm, which is adapted to brain and artificial intelligence productivity model. And I think this means that we need to first integrate the brain capital measures, need to have firm measures that integrate brain capital, but also artificial intelligence type of adapted skills. And these are all can be easily integrated into a new formula that at least we can take this type of productivity paradigm forward based on the changes that we are producing in terms of the thinking, brain capital, brain economy, and artificial intelligence era where we are living. So, of course, if, for example, we manage to have brain capital and artificial intelligence type of skills, high productivity, of course, significantly amplifies, leveraging, obviously, the cognitive strength and artificial intelligence integration. But then if it is low, then we are investing more, and we have to invest more in these areas. And this also gives us the incentives to invest more in this area. Now, obviously, maximizing productivity, taking into account this paradigm shift in productivity, is essential. And we need to focus on youth then we can really benefit and leverage from the next years for brain economy, I would say. If I mention, if I integrate this thinking in the next, say, 10 to 20 years. And I think it is important to very soon start investing carefully in the type of skills, cognitive skills for youth. So then the productivity gains will become transformative over these years. And of course, this all you mentioned, I mean, those skills that the World Economic Forum survey has mentioned, efficient, for example, in terms of the critical thinking and analytical skills, data literacy, algorithm literacy, and so on and so forth. I'm not going to go into all of this, but this will allow us to boost as much as possible our transformative era for integrating this type of innovations into the productivity models and thinking. Beyond this, I think a lot of ecosystem will need to be changing at the societal and economic level, and very clear actions will have to be put in place at the G7, at the G20, at a global level to ensure that this thinking is happening at multi-stakeholder level and also multi-disciplinary level. And this is what we're trying to do with the brain economy, and also taking into account building this type of new ecosystems for the youth to prosper in the future and not to fall into the challenges that artificial intelligence is bringing us, and eventually I would say, inadapted or non-adapted matrix of productivity that we have today. So the changes will have to be at all levels, Harris, and the child and the role of the importance of this is daunting. So I would like to stop here, and happy to stay a bit more for the discussion.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rim. Thanks for evoking the need to think more deeply about the economic metrics and rethink productivity as a construct, and also bring in the measurement piece and of course the global brain capital dashboard may be useful in that regard. And then your point about also thinking through things like living lab models about how to develop platforms for change and testing change. So next, let us go to Eckhard Ernst, who's the chief macroeconomist of the International Labour Organization. We're delighted, Eckhard, to have you here, given your expertise in the labor area. So I'll hand the microphone to you and to your slides. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Harris, and thanks for having me. Let me just open my slides here. Here we go. You should be able to see full screen.
Yes,
so I wanted to bounce off from what you had mentioned, Harris, at the very beginning in terms of anxiety. I think one of the things that strikes me the most when I talk to different interlocutors in my work is really that kind of heightened sense of uncertainty and the anxiety that comes with it. And just in preparing for this webinar, I actually kind of tried to find some statistics, and really struck me that to see that, over time, and you look back over the last, let's say, 30 years or so, you see an increased anxiety. I mean, the number obviously is a bit distorted because 2021 was really in the midst of the pandemic. But, even if you take other indicators of uncertainty, you see that there is a sense of we don't know where we are going. And so that kind of has lifted up anxiety, even beyond the clinical form of anxiety among the broader population. And that in itself, as we all know, is an indication, or has an immediate impact, not so much on the brain health, but on your capacity of your brain to actually process information. And so I wanted to kind of use that as a starting point for what I wanted to tell you in the remaining few minutes, by focusing maybe on two aspects of this increasing uncertainty and anxiety. One is this accelerating technological change that we all kind of heard and was already mentioned at the beginning. And then maybe one point that I find particularly relevant, and this is a bit always coming at the surface. Nobody really talks much about this. We somehow seem to kind of acknowledge it, but without necessarily kind of understanding the implication, is the rapidly aging population, especially in advanced economies, but even in some upper middle income countries like China, where population is started to shrink now already. And so I think there are other issues I mentioned here on the slide, like climate change, geopolitical uncertainty, that all comes together in a sense. But I think think these two first aspects seem to me very important to really kind of focus on them for the understanding of why we see of what are the factors that actually affect brain health from a more macro point of view, not so much from a clinical point of view. And the first thing I wanted to mention, and I think it's a bit of a counterpoint to what especially what Rim was mentioning, is I'm very critical about the discussion about digital skills in particular. I mean, this idea that we know all need to learn how to, use computers or whatever. I think that a lot of it is anyway being done automatically. I mean, if you think about younger people, I mean, my children are Gen Z, so they are digital natives, and that they grow up with a tablet when they were toddlers. And so for them, I mean, using a computer is not something particularly innovative. And when you look, I mean, we have done some studies here this is for European economies. When you look back in the 2010s on to what extent digital skills were actually relevant for getting or remaining employed, and B, commanding higher wages, you actually don't find much evidence. So what this chart is showing you is essentially the statistical impact or the statistical measure of digital skills as measured by European Labor Force Service on the capacity of people to get employment, to go back into employment, and to remain employed. And so you see that it is empty boxes. They're all statistically insignificant. So none of these categories actually benefited at all from digital skills, at least over that period, let's say 2010 to 2019. Only if you had been unemployed, you would benefit to a certain extent from mentioning digital skills on your resume, which indicates it's more like an indication of a signaling effect rather than something that is genuinely and fundamentally important for doing your job. And again, it comes back to this idea that a lot of these digital skills that we supposedly need to have, we're learning them anyway by just simply using computers and trying them out. I mean, if you look at adoption rates also right now for AI, actually employees are often much more open to use AI in their daily work than employers, who are much more afraid of all the legal implication it has, for instance, for data privacy, etc. So the idea that somehow we have to have this massive amount of training and education and retraining of people to kind of learn these digital skills seems to be a bit overblown, and I think it's more like a marketing gag for some providers or educational providers in this area. And related to that, the question is what is the type of skills that we really need? Again, a lot of anxiety that comes with this has to do with the fact that we somehow seem to overblow this idea that now everything is changing, it's completely new world. We can't really rely on the kind of expertise that we had in the past, and everything changes. And when you look at this is a chart that was done by McKinsey before the whole wave of Gen AI that we are currently seeing, and trying to understand what is the kind of skills that we actually need. They mention technological skills indeed, but they also mention on the second place social and emotional skills. So all those skills that you in principle learn when you're already, when you're growing up through, peer effects, etc. So somehow these are skills that you're not necessarily formally trained for, but you actually acquire them through social interaction in your, let's say, normal environment. And I think it's important to recognize that, because one of the key points and something that I find particularly missing in this whole discussion of AI is the fact that we need to understand what the implications of these AI tools are in terms of our social environment, in terms of how we interact. So social media was already mentioned, but I think it goes beyond that. One example that I always point out, and I think I noticed that somebody from the OECD is here as well, so maybe she wants to kind of expand it more on this. The OECD pointed out, rightly so in my sense, that one of the key challenges for us to understand is the implications of AI tools in interaction, something that is called algorithmic collusion or competition in an AI age. Because some of the effects that we can already see is that AI tools tend to interact not only with humans, but they interact also with each other, and in a sense not necessarily commensurate with particularly good and positive social outcomes. So I think this is an aspect where I find it's much more relevant and much more difficult to understand and analyze than the idea that we often talk about biases, etc., and how we need to be complementary to the AI tools. I think we need to really much more understand how will AI change our social environment and how does that affect our complementarity in terms of our skill sets with the with AI. And then in relation to that kind of skill perspective, one other aspect that I find important to mention here is it's not only, we focus a lot on young people and what kind of training we need to provide to young people. But if you think about, and that brings in my demography argument, if you think about that, we are getting older and older. We also need to think about how we maintain the capacity for older workers to actually remain active and remain productive in the labor market. So lifelong learning has been a buzzword for at least the last 50 years. Do you find references to lifelong learning even in 200 years ago in certain documents? So the idea that we need to learn over the entire span of at least our working life is not something novel, but yet we have no institutions that are formally allow us to actually exploit it. And so there's a lot of anxiety, again, coming back to this anxiety idea, there's a lot of anxiety that is being affects middle-aged and older people to understand where their place is in society, where they can productively contribute to not only their economic but also their social life. And here, this is again a chart from McKinsey that I contributed to in a report some years ago, where we actually analyze, to what extent your experience on your job becomes more and more important over your lifetime, of your seniority, but it's not really recognized by any diploma. So you actually have nothing to show for, other than you have a certain number of years that you worked for your company or for your institution, but that's not necessarily something that is marketable. So here the idea is really to say, when we need to find new ways, new institutions, and maybe with the help of AI, that kind of identify and help us to be able to market the skills that we have acquired, the market the competences that we have acquired over the span of our working life. And then last point that is clearly related to demography and now to the shifts in demographic weight across countries is the fact that we are facing a major talent shortage. So the idea that somehow AI is A, taking our jobs, and B, making us all poorer in a sense, I think it's really something that we have to reflect strongly about, because we actually need AI, we need new tools to complement and to fill the gaps that are being left by shrinking working age population and shrinking populations overall. Here, these are two statistics from previous reports that we did at the ILO. And what is I think important to highlight is the fact that these talent shortages are highly geographically concentrated, mostly among advanced economies. But unfortunately, those who live in countries where there is a shortage, a surplus of workers, are not necessarily equipped, for many reasons. They're not necessarily equipped to be able to fill in the gaps that we have in countries like the US, like Germany, like Switzerland. And we will need to find ways to make sure that these people actually have the capacity to fill in these gaps, either by helping them to get the right training, but also by overcoming some regulatory and legal issues that will prevent them from migrating and from filling in the gaps. Or alternatively, by filling in the gaps through new ways of interaction that are currently being developed through the gig economy, for instance, through platform economies. So again, the anxiety that comes with it is because we don't really have good policy solutions that have been implemented, but we actually have some ideas on this, how to do that, but we need to kind of forcefully put them forward, find international consensus around some of these solutions to be able to implement them and overcome that anxiety that affects so much our economies. So just to sum up, my main points here really is the idea that we have these times of increasing anxiety, uncertainty, and that affects our capacity to use our brains. And I think, in my sense, there are really two issues that we need to focus on, particularly the technological disruption and skills, and the other one is the talent shortages and the global talent mismatch. So in a sense, in a nutshell, for me, maintaining brain capital is not only a medical issue, it's really also macro and an economic issue. So thanks a lot and looking forward to the discussion.
Well, thank you so much, Eckhard. That's a masterclass, and wonderful to have a labor economist here to take us through all of that. I think that it was great that you highlighted many things, but one is the lifespan approach and the life course approach, which of course is extremely relevant to the G7, given the aging demographics in G7 nation states. But then the way that you also opened up the low middle income country, high income country dynamics brings into focus that we are also developing a brain economy summit for the G20 in South Africa. And so that really is very helpful for us to think through these global north, global south dynamics in that regard. So really, thank you very much. I think that's given all of our other keynote speakers and discussants a lot to think about and reflect on. So moving forward, Fred Oswald is next. Fred is a senior professor of industrial and organizational psychology at Rice University. And so, Fred, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for having me, Harris, and thanks for the opportunity to speak here. This was a bit of a last-minute request, so I don't have any slides. Rather than that, I will borrow other slides that were just presented. So my background, just for a matter of context, I work in both educational and work domains. So as an industrial organizational psychologist, usually we're doing work within organizations, predicting, understanding, predicting, modeling what employee success is. Asking what that is a philosophical question as much as an empirical one, right? What are we doing, in other words, and how do we then operationalize it, model it, make it turn into data, and figure out what aspects of employees actually contribute to success, and also all the kind of multi-level structures like teams and managers, training as an intervention, and so on. All those ideas then translate also to student success, asking the big questions of what is student success, what is the context of a student, what is the life of a student, what influences are coming into play that actually lead to that success. And moreover, understanding is one thing, but another thing is how much of that can we systematize in a way that would create future success, right? We learn something maybe in the world through AI about what makes for a successful student. Can we capitalize on the signals found in the data and perhaps modeling to move other students forward in the future in ways that they may not do on their own? So that's just context. I'm a researcher in both the educational and the workspace, the employment space. Eckhardt's slide number 4, if you were to look at that, I think you would see a lot of domains that overlap with what I plan to cover here, is to say that in our research, looking at things like college mission statements, what educators claim as being important in school for learning and by extension for the workplace. Through our systematic efforts, we found sort of these, you could say, these buckets. There's an intellectual bucket, which is most obvious, perhaps. Knowledge is an outcome, grade point average. What are you learning and where are you going with that learning, right? With that comes the processes behind it. How do you get to the widgets of knowledge, right? You engage in learning, you're curious, you engage in learning processes. That also is part of the intellectual part of our research. And how do you stimulate that learning, right? Beyond being a passive recipient. Is AI perhaps encouraging more dynamic processes? Can we learn more from those processes as a function of the technology? I mean, those are still relatively open questions. I'm involved with some with various educational research oriented companies to investigate that question in hopes it pays off in multiple ways, I suppose. The second bucket would be of concepts would be interpersonal. Think about communication, teamwork, empathy, and social support. Those types of interactions that matter to move things along. We are humans after all, and technology is in our in our service, rather than vice versa. And so how does the interpersonal facilitate what you're trying to do as a student or at work? Finally, the third bucket would be intrapersonal processes, managing your physical and emotional health, self-management in terms of time, in terms of tasks, in terms of people. You're leading your own life, right? In terms of, we talk about leadership. Well, I know Rice University and other schools eventually want world leaders, right? But even at the most micro level, we're all managing our lives, and AI, I guess, is going to be part of that journey for all of us. But how does that actually then play into your development as a person in terms of your self-management, as I said, physical, emotional health, your ethics? Let's not forget that, your moral compass around all this context. And so how do we develop students with sensibilities around the AI that is permeating all of their world? And all of this is interrelated, right? I characterize them as buckets, but of course they mutually influence each other. When you work on a team and you have an emotional bond, or you communicate clearly, you help somebody when you don't have to. These have various forms of payoff that can be intellectual in nature, right? You can learn more by working on a team. You can learn how to manage your time and tasks by interacting with people and getting feedback. It's not just from AI, obviously, right? But as I mentioned earlier, the question is now, given this is a really complex process, can AI capture that process perhaps in a way that we hope for? What does that mean? And how can AI facilitate these processes? And how should data, both from an ethical and a functional perspective, be linked to create success at the individual student level, but also at the macro level by extension, all these levels we've already been talking about? These are pretty open questions, but the fact there are these, life is complex, right? And how do we capture some of these interactions over time? Is it to what end, and how do we do that to facilitate improvement and success, whether it's at school, eventually at work, and in life in general? I think that's really important. And these lines are blurring, right? We talk about remote work, and school may be more AI oriented. People who live in rural areas may benefit from AI more in terms of accessibility. There may be trade-offs, right? But you can imagine the lines. We're living the lines that are in fact blurring. An issue here is, so I've laid out all these capacities. How do they align with demand in the workforce? And how does AI really play a role in that? AI is not a monolith. I think Eckhart alludes to this, right? Kids are always engaging with technology one way or another. And I've been a big proponent of AI is as AI does. Like when we talk about AI, let's talk about use cases more. I just think that's really, really important to see. How is it really, it's almost anthropological, right? But at least when you're starting to explore, it's more bottom up. Like, how's it really working? What does it really mean in terms of these broader implications for student educational and work successes? AI can obviously supplement work. You have a robot now doing customer service. It can transform jobs. You can, maybe AI creates efficiencies such that a job actually takes on new roles, maybe combines traditional jobs, and asks more and different things of workers. And then, of course, there's the fear that's expressed about AI taking jobs away as well, with important implications as well. I'm no economist, but I understand the macro level of supply and demand here in this ecosystem. And how do we prepare for this? How does everybody prepare for this, right? Parents, communities, schools, workforce, students themselves, obviously, and what policies are going to shape these in the future. The problem is we don't have a static target, right? The target keeps shifting, the markets keep shifting, AI keeps shifting, and we try and find islands of stability, because otherwise, how can you can't row the boat toward anything. So you have to make some predictions at least, and maybe you actually see some things on the shoreline. But that's challenging. Maybe we do need, as the EO, Trump's EO indicates, we do need some level of broad AI literacy. We need to train for the new skills and roles required in work that might be, you need broad AI literacy, but also those specific skills might be needed, whether it's prompt generation or how do you use AI agents, or, what other skills become important. But also, going back to the point of these so-called buckets of capabilities, other skills become more important, perhaps, right? If, I've worked with, in the educational environment, the notion that AI might take on grading if a teacher has a massive course load. Maybe AI can take some of the burden off of grading. There's still a human in the loop. But the point then is that teachers can then focus on emotional support at school. And you can imagine this at work as well, where some of the administrative work is taken care of by AI so that managers can manage perhaps in a more human sense. So with all this, if you went to Eckhart's slide 6, you look at fitting a job versus the volume of jobs that are available, right? It's one thing to say a person fits a job, right? There are plenty of kind of products out there on the market saying we'll find the best job for you. But is that job actually available for you, given who you are, given what the job market is like? That is critically important. And I have had opportunities to work with the World Bank and OECD to appreciate that this is not just about, it is about students, but it's also about nothing less than the national economies, national stability, well-being in the aggregate. And, we're all in this together. I think fostering cultures are incredibly important. How does policy turn into details where the rubber meets the road? How is the student using AI in the specifics? And how does policy get to that kind of behavior by students? Well, culture, I think, is an important intermediary, right? Teachers and students working together in more of a top-down way. There are partnerships. For example, American Federation of Teachers has partnered with Microsoft to create these cultures, give teachers more AI literacy as much as students, so that they are empowered together to share their knowledge. I just give that as one example, not a definitive one. But to contrast the top-down partnerships like that with the bottom-up as well, you could say that students and workers alike may go rogue in a sense from the bottom-up. They're using whatever technologies are available. They may be clicking off terms of agreement without really realizing what they're clicking off on. We all do that when we buy a house or a car. And in the AI sense, we have this happening as well. And what is that? How does the top-down and bottom-up play into each other when it comes to AI? I know at Rice University, we struggle with this ourselves. We think about, well, what are the institutional responsibilities for the use of AI versus what students are already doing on their own? And I think there are parallels in many educational and work settings there. All right, I'll leave my comments at that, and thank you for your time and attention. And any other, I'm happy to talk after this, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Fred. Your very wide-ranging remarks, some philosophical challenges, and a lot of questions that you raise for us that need to be solved in the future as the evidence needs to be developed in this field in the science. I think your perspective is unique given you're at Rice, so you know what it's like to be at the coalface of educating youth, and and then also you are industrial and organizational, so you understand the business side and the organizational side. But then, of course, given your policy experience, you've thought about this deeply at larger levels, including national levels. So very, very grateful to have you there. And your deep reflections, particularly on Eckhart's slides. I don't know if Eckhart thought his slides would be assessed that much, but that's wonderful.
I am deeply indebted.
Great. Well, and I should say, Fred, given you're at Rice, we should make it clear to people that there is a major Houston brain economy event taking place May 21st and 22nd. And this is a major summit, really, of business leaders and political leaders and academic leaders to articulate for the first time a city-level brain economy strategy. And so Houston is the lighthouse of the world currently. And so we'll be, Fred, you'll be there in and out of the summit, and it'll be interesting to see what we can generate in Houston to try to answer some of these questions and to advance some of these agendas, and then hopefully we can share that with the rest of the world. And hopefully we could actually take that to the G7 as well, and what we develop in the Houston context. So anyway, thank you, Fred, and for your intervention. And now let's turn to Tim Fox. Tim is another unique. Every speaker has been very unique, but Tim is extremely unique because he's coming at this from the K-12 education, schooling executive perspective. Tim leads the School Studies Council at the Graduate School of Education at UPenn, University of Pennsylvania. So Tim, we're very glad to have you here and to hear your unique thoughts about what this means to teachers and to school administrators and to school districts and even beyond. So over to you, Tim. Thanks.
Thank you, Harris. I am really grateful for this opportunity to represent and reflect an audience that I engage with on a regular basis. We convene superintendents in the United States of K-12 systems across the country, and those superintendents touch over 1 million children every day. I give you that context because Eckhart and Fred and Rem and Harris really set it up for me. I could go through the technical parts of my slides, which I'm going to share now, but I want to do something before we get to that and just give us an opportunity to, and if there's any difficulty with my slides, please let me know and I will adjust them as soon as possible. Can everybody see my slides?
No, the screen, we could see your slides and now the screen's gone black.
Okay, let me try that again. My apologies.
Okay, we can see your screen.
See the screen? Can you see the slide?
We have the Viktor Frankl quote.
Yes, perfect,
Yeah.
perfect. If you can see that, wonderful. So I'm gonna go a little bit of a different direction. And to Harris's point, I have a sector that I'm representing. And when I think back to November of 2023, when I met Harris, I was in a room full of individuals that were representing domains, and all of those individuals were talking about the importance of youth, but the domains they were coming from weren't connected to youth at all. And so in that moment, I recognized how disconnected the K-12 sector was from this conversation broadly. And yet I knew that I couldn't be a reactor. I had to be a responder. And so that's the thought process behind the quote that you all see. Between stimulus and response, there is a space, and that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. It may seem simple, but for me, I've learned that I have to actualize that space between stimulus and response. If I'm not intentional about it, I'll be reactionary and not responsive. Why I think that correlates to our conversation today, especially as it pertains to youth and where they are and where they sit, is many times we are reacting to generations that we don't understand. We're not responding to them. And it may seem like semantics, but there's a distinct difference. As I think about the opportunities of practice, I'm intentionally using that phrasing instead of problems of practice, the opportunities of practice that the K-12 sector faces broadly, not just in the United States, as we acclimate to generational shifts. This concept of advancing youth brain skills, brain capital, brain health, and subsequently a brain economy really sits in a story I want to tell you all. And I want you to think about this as I'm talking about it, and hopefully will carry it with you as you go into different spaces and have an opportunity to engage. So one of the districts that are a part of the platform that I steward, the superintendent was in attendance at a meeting, and we were talking about mental health. And he said, I would love to have a moment with my colleagues, because in the last 3.5 weeks, I've had 3 suicide attempts of students. Now, his district is not, it doesn't include high school. It's just kindergarten to 8th grade. So I want you to think about young people from the age of 5 to the age of 13. And within that group, in less than a month's time, 3 young people attempted to take their lives. I'm humanizing this conversation at a greater level on purpose, because many times we disconnect from the humanity because we're trying to prove things to external audiences that we need to pay for or to fund the work. But I want you all to remember the humanity that you're reflecting and representing when you go into these spaces. I'm not saying detach from the quantitative expressions, the data. I'm saying bring with that data the real stories. Because as the superintendent began to tell us about the circumstances and situations as he unpacked it, it really was around young people feeling dehumanized and not being aware of the fact that their insecurities, vices, and proclivities had been commodified. And that commodification showed up in an algorithm that kept telling them repeatedly that they were less than. And so as we have this broad discussion, and I appreciate all of the different pieces, I want to emphasize and prioritize the humanization of this work. That's not an indictment of anyone. It's not an accusation. It's a reflection of what we need to do. The next group I want to humanize, quite frankly, are teachers. Because as Fred talked, as Eckhart talked, as we look at this concept of workforce shortage, and we look at it expressly from a K-12 sector perspective, it is becoming less and less intriguing, interesting, and desirable, and dare I say palatable, to prepare the next generation to grow, learn, and lead. Because the environment of teaching has shifted, it's changed. And so I think it's really essential that as we take in these opportunities and as we look at the advancing of youth brain capacity, skill, and health, we also look at those that are responsible for facilitating those skill sets, developing the cognition and cognitive capacity, adaptability, and creativity. Who's developing that? Who's establishing environments for cognitive stretch and growth? And what's happening with those individuals as it pertains to their health? As Eckhart talked about, looking across the continuum, looking at the demographic, looking at the ecosystem that is learning and educating and supporting the development of the next generation. And I refer to it that way because I need us to be very intentional about understanding what happens in the preparation of young people academically, emotionally, physically, and to Fred's point, ethically. Because if we're not developing the character in the folks that are guiding the classrooms, how can character be transposed to the ones that they're guiding? And so many times there's this disconnect that occurs because we have misplaced expectations of educators, and then they're put in spaces where those expectations escalate, but they haven't been empowered to meet the expectation. And so I know for certain that Harris and the different groups that have been part of convening us today want to make sure that we're intentional about having an ecosystem perspective. And so I'm encouraging you all to adapt that if you haven't already, both an ecosystem and a systems thinking perspective, because the levers all work together. If we had hours, I could talk to you about the interconnectedness of healthcare and education and governmental policies. I'll give you one more case study and story. I'm on a call yesterday with a school district in Southern Pennsylvania. It is a district where it's been labeled as a food desert, and now it's become a healthcare desert because the major hospital that was providing care that allowed young people to be healthy, be in school, and have an opportunity to develop their cognitive skills shut down. And so now the nurses that were being deployed by that health institution, the other supports that were being provided, all vanish. So the superintendent was on a call with me, and we're talking about how do we address this concern? Fortunately, there are some options, and we're going to look into those options as it pertains to telehealth. But I just want you to get an understanding, if you don't have already, and if you already have one, I want you to understand the gravity of what we're really engaging about here. When we unpack it, it's much more rich than just a group of policies, a workforce shortage, an advancing of cognitive skill. And this is in a country that is wealthy. When I think about countries that are not, it wrenches me a little more because I know individuals that live in countries that don't have the same access. And so every conversation I'm in, every facilitation that I have to do, I always start by centering the individuals in gratitude. Central to my work is leadership development. And it spills over because we started out just dealing with K-12. And then I said, no, this is not going to work. We have to have an interdisciplinary approach. And then I said, oh, this is not going to work. We can't just have an interdisciplinary approach to developing education leaders. That approach has to go to all leaders. And we have to build skill sets that include a real clean understanding of brain health, brain skills, and the brain economy, which brings me to another thing that is a common thread as we have this discussion today. And I just want to encourage you all with this. Many times we have a glossary of terms, but we don't have agreement on the definition. So as Eckhart was talking, and he was giving real clear, concrete statistics and data, and having studied economics as an undergrad, I related to it. It made me think about positive and negative externalities and economies of scale and all of these different things that came back to my thinking. But it's because I had been exposed. And if Eckhart and I had a conversation, we could have this conversation and we would have some type of mutual agreement about the definition of those concepts, because those concepts have life longer than our lives. The however is that when the needle can move or when the goalpost can move, and someone can subjectively change a definition, we run into challenge. And so I just want to center you all in a few things. I have several slides, which I won't get to all of them. I would tell you that we already heard about the data. We've heard about the demand for this work. So going over that is not necessarily critical. We saw the article referenced by Harris, 30% of youth, they're not possessing the skills they need. And especially in countries that are struggling. When you think about this and you think about how it's playing out, we can't be reactionary. I'm going back to my first slide. I'm going back to Viktor Frankl. We have to respond. And I always talk about responding out of my reservoir of wisdom. Wisdom is not my intelligence. It's not the things that I'm aware of. It's the things that I have the capacity to do because I've intersected intelligence with application. And so now I know I can circle back to that wisdom because it's tried and true. AI poses an interesting reality for us because in many ways it has allowed individuals to separate from reality. We often talk about what I call avatar syndrome and the impact of it on young people. The fact that they can design a reflection of themselves that's not authentic, and that reflection can be presented to them electronically and then presented to the world electronically. And now there's this representation that's their imagination or how they like to see themselves, but not who they actually are. And then they become subject to predators. They become subject to their vices, insecurities, and proclivities being merchandised and now being lured into this space. And then if we're really honest about it, and I've seen it firsthand with elderly people in my family, it happens on the opposite side of the spectrum as well. That luring because of either belonging or something that's absent or missing culturally, emotionally, socially, and all of the above at times. As I close out, I want to leave you all with a few things. I was invited to the convening at the UN, and one of the things that came to me as I sat on the panel with Michael Platt was this concept of algorithmic health. And it's been addressed here, but it's something that I want us all to consider. And as I look at it, and it is running alongside of brain health, I believe it's something that we have to truly consider if we want to make a difference with youth. And I want to just briefly touch on the three things that comprise it. Cognitive.
And Tim, we'll need to wrap up after this slide as well. We've got to get, we've got 5 more people to fit in. We've only got 24 minutes left. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Thank you.
So you all can see it: cognitive influence, decision-making behavior, and social contagion. Harris, thank you for the time. I hope that this brought some context and content to our conversation that wasn't there previously. We need you all to represent and reflect the youth, but those that serve the youth, and do so with intentionality. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tim, for grounding us in the reality of what superintendents deal with and teachers deal with on a day-to-day, and for bringing your sort of your expertise from the leadership program that you're running. It's extremely helpful, and you're an important conduit between the real world of students and then the world of academia, policy, and think tanks. So very, very helpful to have you here. And so in the interest of time, we have one more keynote, and then we have 4 discussants ideally to fit in. So we've got to be efficient from here on, I want to hand the microphone to Giovanni Ferri, who's a professor of economics at LUMSA University. Giovanni, take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Harris. It's a great pleasure for me to be here with you, and I must say that I'm learning a lot from the presentations that you gave. I am afraid, due to short notice, I didn't prepare a presentation, so I will try to fit in to the discussion by laying out some arguments that might be hopefully relevant or stimulating for our webinar. About 12 years ago, I'm an economist by background. I started working with some psychologists, fellow, and we became increasingly interested in the topic of emotional intelligence. Now, emotional intelligence is not a new concept, and it's probably still being developed, and but in any way, I found it particularly promising as a way to try to understand how the ability to use emotions can be a determinant of economic and social behavior. And we have published some papers in the past. One that we published in 2019 already was about emotional intelligence acting as a mediator between need for relatedness and happiness and flourishing. So in that paper, through survey data that were collected, we showed that the need for relatedness is important, as it should be, in terms of leading to higher happiness, the hedonic measure, if you wish, of individual well-being, and also of flourishing, which is an eudaimonic measure, more objective measure of individual well-being. But the moment you introduced emotional intelligence, we discovered that everything goes through that. So there is a mediating role of emotional intelligence. It's not just you hang out with the others, you have relationships, social relationships. Those social relationships will have a meaning, a different meaning depending on your ability to extract value from those relationships. So emotional intelligence is helpful. And so we started thinking about, well, if this result that people who are endowed with higher levels of emotional intelligence leads these people to be able to extract more benefits from being in relationships with the others, maybe this is social implications. They will try to consume more social goods rather than individual goods. And so then we evolved along this reasoning, and we came up with another project in which and we are currently working on some results. We have we have defined a questionnaire, we have collected the data, and we have about 2,500 responses from all over the world that we got through this platform, which is called Prolific. That is very useful if you want to go collect data online. And these people, we have some preliminary results, and the evidence shows that higher emotional intelligence is somehow associating with lower sustainable footprint of consumption. So people who are who have a higher level of emotional intelligence tend to select more experiences rather than consumption goods. And within the experiences and within the consumption goods, they tend to, for some reason, to select those goods and those experiences that imply a lower sustainable footprint, which is measured by either perceived sustainable footprint or actually measure sustainable footprint. We had an engineer working for us measuring from the list of goods and experiences we had as a possible selection for the interviewees through life cycle assessment, which is a technique that measures how much CO2 is embodied in a product or in an experience. So the idea is that the higher level of emotional intelligence may be leading to more sustainable consumption, which is good news, because if this is true, we may have a different approach, because up to now, particularly from the background I have in economics, we tend to think of price incentives, carbon tax, for instance, or whatever, in order to induce more sustainable behavior. But if we can prove that emotional intelligence is also a good driver of choosing more sustainably, there may be other types of policies that are available. Also because according to the estimates, about from a minimum of 50% to a maximum of 60%, the studies show the emotional intelligence is not predetermined, it can be shaped. Another component of this project is we are looking at how emotional intelligence enhances cooperative equilibria in solving social dilemmas. As you all suspect, I suspect you are all familiar with social dilemmas like the prisoner's dilemma, and it is obvious that there is a better equilibrium. The cooperative equilibrium is superior with respect to the competitive equilibrium, the so-called Nash equilibrium, but you unavoidably end up in the Nash equilibrium because it's a dominant equilibrium with respect to the cooperative equilibrium. Well, the idea here, we have some people working in the lab with experiments, economic labs, of course, and they show that a higher level of emotional intelligence can lead people to cooperate towards the cooperative equilibrium. Another project which we are doing together with my psychologist fellows is looks at how emotional intelligence, whether emotional intelligence affects the impact of artificial intelligence in terms of correcting cognitive biases. For instance, right now we are running an experiment in which we measure overconfidence, which is one of the most well-known cognitive biases, and then we provoke an interaction between the people who are under our experiment, in our experiment, and they, depending on the group they belong to, which is selected casually, it's they are told by ChatGPT or by a human about the overconfidence bias, then we see how whether they correct, how much they correct their overconfidence they started with. A student of mine who is in digital education, a doctoral student of mine, I'm following her up and studying whether emotional intelligence can help diffuse the alienation which is induced by education mechanisms that are based on artificial intelligence. And finally, to mention what my reaction could be to what I learned from you, some of you refer to lifelong education. I think it was Eckhart. Lifelong education is very important. It will be more important. Everybody expects that its importance will increase in the future. But lifelong education has a lot of institutional, technical, and social implications. The institutional implications will have to be studied because, I mean, the fact that knowledge is not once and forever, but it needs to be updated, it needs to be rejuvenated, reshapes the institutional setup of education. Education needs to provide long-term partnerships. Educational institutions need to provide long-term partnerships with people, with individuals. But there are also technical aspects, like you cannot have people go back to school. You need to rely on online or at least blended formats, and this requires technical skills again. And the social implications have to be studied at length. And again, here, the levels of emotional intelligence may be important also in order to be successful in engaging in a long-term partnership with an educational institution. I think I should stop here in order to leave space for the discussion.
Thank you very much, Giovanni, for bringing your perspectives. And you came into this at short notice, but I was glad to hear your perspectives on emotional intelligence and the linkage to sustainable consumption and the climate and environmental agenda, which maps very well to our emerging work linking the brain economy to the nature economy, or brain capital to natural capital. So anyway, thank you very much. And in the interest of time, let's move to our discussants. We have 4 discussants, and we were intending to finish in 9 minutes, but let's go maybe 5 or 10 minutes over. But invite for our discussants to have maybe 3 minutes of quick hit intervention and reflection, if possible. And so I'll hand it to you, Nicole, first. Nicole Bardakov, who is the Associate Director of Global Mental Health at Grand Challenges Canada. Thank you, Nicole. You're I think you're the only Canadian here, which is important in the context of the G7 Canada. So anyway, thank you for your time.
No, thank you so much for having me and for the opportunity to contribute to this really thoughtful and amazing panel. It's been so interesting to hear all of this. I'm going to try to be brief. That may be challenging given all the rich insight that's already come up. And Harris, you've done such a wonderful job already at pulling out some of these really key things. As Harris mentioned, so I come from Grand Challenges Canada, and we support innovation to tackle large-scale health challenges. And so specifically, my work focuses within mental health. And so really coming at this from the perspective of the brain health component. And this is such an important space for us to be talking right now. So 75% of mental health challenges start before the age of 25. It's why I'm so happy we're talking about this from the lens of young people and from youth. And considering the brain economy from that perspective, and then also within that, and this has come up a few times, but really thinking about what this looks like globally. So 70% of the population in sub-Saharan Africa is under the age of 30. So when we talk about where we need to be thinking about and supporting young people in this way. There is this predominant focus as well within the Global South, where there is such a large youth population. And we really think about how we support young people in this ever-changing world, considering this, I think, is really critical. And Tim, who may have dropped off, I think his comments were so important of how we work with young people, because really young people can't and they frankly won't be passive players in their own well-being and their own futures. They need to be part of the conversation. They have a lot to say. At GCC, we have a program called the Being Initiative that's supporting prevention and promotion for young people's mental health. And through that work, we did landscaping in 13 countries. Over the course of a year, spoke to over 3,000 stakeholders. 60% of them were young people, about what their needs were for their mental health, for their well-being. And they identified challenges that likely won't be a surprise to people. Talking about things like family functioning, tackling mental health stigma, bullying, exposure to violence. And I think this ties in with some of the pieces that, some of the panelists were speaking about. Eckhart, I know you talked about this increasing anxiety, and you said from a non-clinical lens, but no matter what, it kind of carries through, which is these problems are increasing. We step back and look at brain health and well-being, we're moving in the wrong direction. So this notion of brain health is becoming more and more important and also more and more fragile. And while the challenges exist across countries, I think what's really clear is that the supports and the systems that are available to young people aren't consistent across countries. We see such a wide disparity here. And I think it's really important when we come at it from this lens as well, things like the use of digital skills, digital tools, AI. And Harris, you framed this so well about the limits of AI, but I think it's also important for us to consider this from other contexts as well, where we lack so much data to be able to really leverage these tools. We lack data from the Global South to feed into LLMs, to think about how we can use these in more strategic and thoughtful ways to support young people, to upskill young people, to consider this more broadly. And where there's also just a lack of technological infrastructure more generally. So Fred gave a really great example of just a quick way we can use AI to support, let's say, teachers in grading. And there's a lot of these use cases in mental health as well, how we can support, use AI to train new mental health professionals by acting as role play, or by summarizing session notes and flagging challenges or red flags. And that's all really valuable and important, but we really need to think about this, of how we test and train and validate AI within more diverse contexts. So alongside this push for thinking about the brain economy, and what this means, we also, I think, need to really think about integrating an additional kind of research, data gathering. What does governance looks like in more diverse settings, so we can really see the kind of opportunities here for young people to really leverage a lot of these potentials. And I'll stop there. I think my primary takeaway is really that we're at this kind of key moment, this nexus for how we consider young people within this ever-changing world in this lens of a brain economy. And AI, digital skills, digital tools are not a panacea, but there is a lot of opportunity here. And it's really important for us to take this kind of systems level view to think about how work is structured, how access is democratized, to really be able to leverage, I think, a lot of these opportunities. So thank you. I'll stop there. I know we don't have much time.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nicole. It's glad to have you reacting and responding to the prior keynotes, and to have Grand Challenges Canada at the table. And we look forward to working more with you in the coming months around the G7 and then beyond, perhaps in other forum as well. So thank you for bringing also the mental health important lens here to the topic, which we probably hadn't touched on quite enough until your intervention points. And so in the interest of time, let's move to Irene Pujol, who's, I think, dialing in from Madrid. Irene's the founder of Generation Kintsugi, and then also at the IE University in Madrid. So Irene, please share your reflections with us and thoughts. But Irene, we can't hear you. Sorry. Okay. Shall we we'll give you a couple minutes, Irene, and let you get your audio sorted. We'll go to Chiara Varazani, who's the lead behavioral scientist at the OECD. Chiara, we welcome your thoughts. Sorry to call on you impromptu as Irene gets her audio fixed.
No worries. Thank you so much, Harris. And it's a real pleasure to be here today with you for such an important and timely discussion. I really enjoyed the presentation, so thank you so much. I wanted to offer a behavioral perspective here I'm a neuroscientist by training, but I'm also the head of the behavioral science team at the OECD. And so from our perspective, really, brain capital is much more than just cognitive ability. It's about how we think, feel, adapt, and act. And of course, in today's AI age, the challenge is not just about building skills, but it's also about shaping habits, decisions, and also trying to design the right environments to support young people flourishing. And these are all things that came out during the presentations and also the previous comments. And I think that Eckhard and Fred and Tim all made similar point, and I think that it's important and critical to ask ourselves, how does AI change our behaviors and our social environment in the context of brain skills, especially for young people? And I just wanted to offer 3 behavioral challenges, definitely not an exhaustive list, but I think these are particularly important as young people face really challenges with brain skills. One is cognitive overload. When you think about it, young people are bombarded by information and platforms, and really their attention is fragmented every day. And this, irrespective of the eye, this reduces their reflective thinking. The second thing is an emotional strain that came out several times already. And we saw clearly today that really mental health is not just a personal issue anymore. It's about productivity. And we saw that anxiety, burnout, and emotional fatigue really can impact economic participation massively. And the third behavioral challenge is motivational misalignment. So we saw that even with great access to AI tools and opportunities, many young people still do not engage. And there are many behavioral factors explaining that, including low agencies, that was also mentioned by Tim, but also present bias and really unclear goals that really play a role in many young people just disengaging completely. Now, I work in policy, and when you think about it, traditionally scaled policies really focuses on the supply side of education reform. But really, as behavioral experts, I think it's time to ask ourselves, how can we redesign the environments around young people to help them succeed? And I think in this, behavioral science can help a lot. So, for example, reducing friction to help AI tools and apprenticeships to be easier to access, but also nudging engagement and including shaping identity. So trying to help young people and educators to see AI as a collaborator and not as a replacement to really shift our mindset. And of course, I think we touched on this quite a lot, on the fact that AI, Gen AI, can be really a double-edged sword. On one side, of course, it can boost thinking when used properly as a tutor or a thought partner. But we know also that it can encourage cognitive passivity. And I think we're just starting to see the effect of this. But really, if we don't use this tool to try and develop our own reasoning, I think in the medium and long term, this will have massive disruption. And at the OECD, our work really shows that AI literacy must be paired with what we call behavioral scaffolding. So in a nutshell, we should learn ourselves, but also teach young people on when not to trust the machine. And so really the idea here is try to reward curiosity and exploration in interaction with Gen AI without just rewarding correct answers. And with this, the OECD, we are now increasingly exploring how to design neuro-inclusive policy environments to really try to take brain health and mental bandwidth very seriously to shape better outcomes. Just wanted to leave with 3 very quick provocations here. One is, imagine that AI agents or AI tutors that are becoming more and more widespread Imagine that AI tutors are trained not just to provide answers, but also to build resilience and curiosity in young people, really coming back to the importance of social interaction. But also imagine if career platforms could track emotional and motivational readiness and not just skills. And also, I would love to point out that it would be good if mental health interventions were designed not just around crisis, which seems to be the case, but also just really around everyday habit change. And I think that all the great speakers today confirmed that youth brain capital is really an ecosystem challenge. So we need much smarter coordination between education, technology, and health. And I think that it's really important to embed behavioral design from the very start. And at UCD, really, we see this as a policy priority, but not only. This is really a shared responsibility to try to empower the next generations a little bit more with the right mindsets and the environments to thrive. So thank you so much.
I'm taking over from Harris. Thank you, Chiara, for connecting this to behavioral economics. And I think this work is extremely important currently to design the overall change of paradigm in terms of skills and also labor markets and for economic policy as a whole. I would like to give straight away to Irene for our next discussion.
Thank you. Can you hear me now? Okay, perfect. Yeah. So first, thanks for the opportunity to be here. It was inspiring to hear all the constructive contributions and see that we are all aligned. I want to touch, in fact, like many of the points that you all raised, particularly the impact of AI and how to deal with it, the need to redefine productivity and the context of rising anxiety, and the broader culture that surrounds it from a human perspective. So I'm gonna follow Mr. Fox's advice to humanize this conversation. I'm the founder of a youth-led mental health association that I created after my brother died by suicide. And since then, I've had like many conversations almost every day with young people, educators, parents that are worried about these issues. And since I work at the Center for the Governance of Change at IE that focuses on the impact of technology, I also have that perspective on how we can govern technologies to mitigate the risks and amplify opportunities. So from the human perspective, what can I tell you? Almost everyone I talk with, my surroundings, myself included, I was born in the 97, so I'm a part Gen Z, part millennial, experience chronic anxiety, I will say, like on a daily basis. Almost everyone I know is from my generation is anxious, and some of them have depression as a result of anxiety, right? Like when you are in an ongoing state of stress, self-criticism, hypervigilance, and emotional station, and that leads the body to shut down, right? So what do all these people have in common? Often they are overachievers, but even those who aren't are still share a context of shaped by deep cultural forces based on the years that we've grown and developed and the education that we've been given. So one of the most important cultural forces is obviously the universal human need for social validation that is amplified in our generation by an educational system that has for a long time tied our worth to productivity and performance, and social media platforms that turn validation into a metric that allows ourselves to compare to each other. To that, we need to add a sense of never being enough, shaped by neoliberal values of constant self-optimization and the pressure to be always producing, improving, visible, with no time for pause or that reflection Mr. Fox was talking about. And how does this link to brain skills? I mean, cognitive effort is hard, we know that. And if you give people, especially young people, under pressure, a tool that seems to help them perform better and faster they will use it, even if they know that might weaken their own skills in the long run. This is where AI becomes relevant. We're aware of its risk. I'm aware of its risks. My friends are aware. But if you're dealing with chronic time pressure, fear of failure, and the need to achieve, you will prioritize short-term efficiency over long-term capacity building. And this isn't just about culture. It gets worse, as we were saying, when these internalized pressures are combined with external scarcity, like economic precarity, inequality, and social insecurity. My generation, and even if we're like privileged here in the West, is one of the best educated in history, and yet our prospects are often, and we all know that, worse than our parents. Wages are lower, housing is out of reach, and success demands more from us than ever before. We're expected to manage multiple jobs or clients, take care of our bodies, keep up socially, and now, on top of everything, take care of our mental health too. So yes, if you take a tool like ChatGPT, which can help us write faster, I'll use it, even if I notice my creativity and writing skills are getting worse, because I feel I cannot afford not to. But the problem, again, and I emphasize that, and I'll finish with that, is not AI or social media. At the Center for the Governance of Change, we always talk about how technology is neutral, and what we need to address is the system. And the issue is that these technologies are designed and governed within a system that exploits our most basic psychological needs for connection, validation, and belonging, and ties them to metrics like grades, outputs, and likes. So I'll finish with a quote by the sociobiologist Edward O. Wilson that I like to quote always. The real problem of humanity is the following: we have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. We need to address that disparity in order to address all these problems. If we want to boost brain skills, to boost productivity, the first thing we need to do is to redefine productivity itself. As Professor Rim was saying, valuing quality over quantity, outcome over output, and the process over the results. That will take a lot of pressure out from our shoulders, and I think we'll do better in the long run. Thank you.
Irene, thank you very much for your comments, and I think I only agree with you. I mean, our matrix institutions, they are not anymore equipped to deal with the societal challenges we have. And this is not only in the developed countries, but also in the emerging market and developing countries. And there, the problem is even more acute because not only we do not have information, but also the voices are not there to talk because sometimes they cannot talk. And this is also worsening the democratic values in those countries. And we need to connect this also to our thinking about economic policy. Now, of course, I mean, the whole debate about today webinar is about productivity, and I mean, I think the matrix that we've been using, we don't even use them anymore. I think we use them just for our I would call it collective policy of denial about things that really a complete gap between what is reality, what are the economic models and theories are saying. And that gap is just getting bigger and bigger every day to a point that one day we might not even able to fill in the gap. With this, I would like to welcome Kana Inomoto. Kana, she's the Director of Brain Health in McKinsey Health Institute. Over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Rim, and fascinating conversation. I am very motivated to think about brain health and youth in particular, both as an advocate and because I understand the wide-reaching implications for our society, but also as a mother, as a parent of a young person who has struggled with their mental health. I understand that you can only be as happy as your unhappiest child, and when your child is not performing at their best, it really has implications for the rest of their lives, how well they do across every dimension, their physical health, their mental health, their social health, and their spiritual health. And that's exactly what our research at the McKinsey Health Institute has shown, that young people today around the world are experiencing a great deal of distress. They are saying that their mental health is worse than every other aspect of their health. And we need to act soon, because we know that, as Nicole mentioned, these conditions, 75% of them are present by the age of 24, 50% by the age of 14. And the peak burden of mental and substance use disorders is between the ages of 20 and 45, which is much earlier than the peak burden of non-communicable diseases, other non-communicable diseases like cancer, diabetes, and heart disease. And this is the year that the United Nations is having the high-level meeting on non-communicable diseases. And it's really important that mental health is part of that conversation, that we understand the full implications across people's lifespans and across their health. So for young people, mental disorders are the top non-communicable diseases, both in morbidity and mortality burden. So when you combine mental disorders and substance use disorders, it's really, really critical that we address them early. We provide prevention, treatment, and recovery services, because there is so much to gain from this. We know that there are effective interventions that, if we could scale access to them, meaning maybe we could get 90% of people to have access to preventive treatment and recovery services. We've done an analysis in a publication that we recently published, that about 1.5 trillion in GDP and 6 million work years could be regained by enhanced productivity and participation of the current and future workforce by 2050 in the United States alone. And if we look at the contribution for young people, it would be 285 billion between now and 2050 for the future earnings potential increase in youth. So people 20 and under, if we could make sure that they had better brain health, we could recapture almost $300 billion, and that's just in the United States. And so this is a vital, vital topic for conversation and for action. Thank you, Rim.
Thank you very much, Kana. And I think what you're saying, especially the emphasis on youth, is essential in terms of also mental health and connection between mental health and brain skills. And I think what we probably needs to do is to push as much as possible the overall paradigm of brain economy forward, and at the same time rethink the traditional matrices. So this is also something that we probably need to think going forward. So with this, I would like to thank very much all the speakers, keynote speakers, and discussants for this very fascinating discussion. I think we have touched this topic and will allow us to think a bit more together from different disciplines, as you all mentioned today, trying really to find solutions, policy solutions, and use cases to allow us to have first of all, the youth participating, as you mentioned, Irene, to the shaping of these new policies within the brain economy and brain skills and reskilling. In an era of artificial intelligence, of course, this is just I would say, revolution almost, that we need to not to shy away from it, but really to try to get the best out of it for all of us, and at the same time emphasize the importance of brain health. And we have to face our realities nowadays, not only from the developed countries, but also from the developing emerging market countries. And then at the same time, trying to do more research, as mentioned by Giovanni, to better understand really the capabilities of our brain and connect this to our economic models. And we are just there to try to really move things forward. So thank you very, very much for your time. Also thank very much Harris, who is not with us today, who made, who moderated this session. And we keep in touch, and then we keep working together toward all this transformative future that we would like to all be part of, and hopefully for the better. Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.